I'm Charles Johnson. I'm the CEO of the Actuarial Development Institute, and I'm here with Noah.
My name's Noah Fritz, and I'm a junior at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee studying actuarial science.
And Noah is about to enter recruitment season and has some questions for me.
Yes, I do. The first one that I think is really important as I enter this field is, what do actuarial interns make?
It's a great question. I survey about 100 interns every year that go in to their summer. So this summer, the average rate has been about $27 or $28 with an exam passed. I think there's maybe one intern under 25, and there's several above 30.
All right. What would you say the starting salary for a starting actuary is at age 22, 23? You get out of an internship, you have a summer's worth of experience. What should you be able to expect coming straight out?
That's a great question. You can actually pull up D.W. Simpson's salary survey, and they show what the average salary that actuaries make based on their years of experience. Entry-level salaries right now are about $80,000.
$80,000, that's pretty good. So what does it look like as we increase? So 27, 32, 10, 5, 10 years out, what am I looking at making?
That's a really good question. You can go out to the D.W. Simpson salary survey and see the average. The great thing about being an actuary is, you have a relatively high starting salary at about $80,000, but you are basically guaranteed over your first 4 or 5 years to have really significant salary increases. The first thing that happens is each exam you pass, you typically get $1,000 to $2,000 raise in salary. Each designation you get, an associateship or a fellowship, you get another $5,000 to $10,000. So you just by passing the exams and going through the exam content, your salary will go up probably to near $100,000. In that time, almost all actuaries get promoted at least 2 times. So I would say it's typical for actuaries 5 years into their career to be making $110,000 to $120,000.
All right, sweet. And so you've talked about these exams. What's the difference between CAS and SOA exams, and kind of the difference between property and casualty and life and health?
Well, the CAS and the SOA are 2 organizations that are run by its members. To become an actuary, you have to pass 10 exams, and it's the people who have passed those exams that determine what the content is and what the qualifications for passing are. So one route, the CAS, credentials actuaries to practice in property and casualty. That's stuff and liability. So think about like autos insurance, homeowners, business insurance, where if an accident happens, I have to pay someone else or I experience a loss. And so all of the exams except for the first 2 for the CAS are for the P&C route. The SOA route covers everything else, but mostly life insurance, health insurance, and then pensions and investments. So, again, they also have about 10 exams, and they're a separate organization. The nice thing for college students is that the first 2 exams, P and FM, if you take those exams or you get credit through university earned credit, it qualifies for either track.
Yeah, that is really nice. So let's fast forward again another couple of years, and let's say I've completed an internship. I've got 3 or 4 exams under my belt. What hours should I expect to work?
Less than Wall Street. We were talking earlier, and you told me how there's been another death on Wall Street. I don't actually know the numbers for actuaries, but I would guess that we're not getting work so hard, that we're burning out and dying. Though the exams are difficult, there's no doubt about that. How much you work depends a lot on where you go. So on one end, there are mutual insurance companies. These are companies that are owned by the policyholders that make strategic long-term decisions. And for the most part, they tend to have pretty well-balanced work-life schedules. So you'll rarely work over 40 hours. There's probably some seasonal work that's, maybe 1 month or 2 months out of the year where you might work an extra 10 or 15 hours a week. But for the most part, you'll have pretty good balance. In the middle is publicly traded companies where you have quarterly deadlines and reports and things that need to go out. You have products that need to be delivered on time, so that there's probably, a couple of weeks, each quarter where you're going to have to work a little more. And then on the far end, there's consulting firms where, the expectation would be if we have work, especially during busy season where, maybe you're doing filings for health insurance products, you might be working 50 to 60 hours a week for 3 or 4 months out of the year. Compensation generally aligns with this. So if you're working a consulting job, you're a good consultant, you're working a lot during busy season, you're probably making pretty good bonuses. You're getting billable hours plus, every extra hour you bill, you get paid for. And so, it really depends where you work. And then even within each one of those, company culture plays a big factor. But on average, actuaries tend to have pretty low work demand relative to the pretty nice salaries that they get.
All right. And so what are some things that you wish you knew before you pursued actuarial science?
That's a good question. I have to be honest, I'm a little glad I didn't know a lot of stuff about it. I certainly wasn't someone who constantly challenged myself when I was younger, and the exams that I took were by far the most difficult thing I've ever done. So I felt pretty lucky that as I took each step forward, I didn't realize how difficult it was going to be, and I got to rise to that occasion. The one thing that I learned early on, and I wish I probably would have started it 12 months sooner, is that all of the credentialing process becomes incredibly easy if you just study a little bit every day. It's about the consistency of studying and less about making sure that you're planning ahead for your exams. And if you're studying every day, you will master the content and be ready for an exam whenever the next sitting is. And then you can string sittings together and pass exams very quickly.
And I'll add to that. So I started out as an engineering major. I've done 3 semesters in engineering, and I've completed a semester in actuarial. And I will say, between the two, it is a very different feel and course load. So from my experience with engineering, it is very cut and dry. You will do this, you will see this, They basically tell you what's going to be on the exam, and you know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
And then you get to actuarial science, and it's fascinating because everything connects in a weird sort of way. It's like you're taking this path, and then very quickly it becomes a circle, and you find yourself continuing on the next path that eventually loops up. So I just wanted to add to that, as I've experienced actuarial and I've done other STEM degrees. It seems like actuarial has a very nice balance of being interesting, but also connecting in a lot of weird ways. And I guess I wanted to add to that too. Is actuarial science just math? So I'm a semester in. I've done 3 semesters of engineering and then BS, and my actuarial science degree is a Bachelor of Arts. So that's another question I was wondering.
Yeah. Is actuarial science all math? No, it's not. It's a lot of math, but it is not all math. And in fact, I would say that actuarial science is one of the coolest multidisciplinary majors, multidisciplinary professions. Even within the requirements that it takes to become an actuary, there's certifications you need in accounting. There's certifications you need in economics, in regression or predictive modeling, even in machine learning. So you learn a lot of the mathematics, but it's the math behind all of these other disciplinary fields. And the reason that you need to master all of these different fields is because you have to understand and use them on the job. It's not like as an actuary when you're working at a company, it's like, okay, I have my math inputs here, I do my calculations, and I have outputs here. You're trying to design and make solutions within the context of the business. How is it going to affect our accounting and balance sheets? What's the tax implications going to be? What are the current regulations, and how do we navigate those? I'm bringing a product to market. What are the economics around it? What am I competing against? What's my pricing? How am I going to compensate people? What if the market changes in the future? How are people's behaviors going to change? So, and just as a testament to this multidisciplinary nature, a third of all actuarial programs are in business schools. Half of them are in math departments. There's 10% of them that are in computer science and math, because there's a lot of coding that you learn as being an actuary. So math is definitely foundational, but the actuarial science profession is very interesting and multidisciplinary.
And the way that I looked at it too is it's kind of like financial engineering. So like when I was in engineering class, you had to obviously develop and design products. And from what I understand, actuarial science is pretty similar to that. You can sit down at your desk and you can kind of navigate your own route to find the solution and answer. So I mean, that was interesting for me as somebody that wanted to pursue a career in science and mathematics, was finding that I could just sit at a desk all day and not be doing CAD, finding something that involved math.
That's interesting. I want to ask about that. So you said one of the differences between engineering and the financial mathematics class you took is, did you experience this in engineering where there are multiple ways to solve a problem?
Absolutely not. So it probably should have been, but at least at our program, I did not feel that way. So the way that our engineering program was set up, especially physics, because physics is a very challenging topic. I mean, to be able to do physics well, you have to be able to understand algebra, you have to be able to understand geometry, and you have to be able to understand calculus. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to understand them all so well that you can connect them in a magical triangle. Okay? You have to make a magical triangle. And that is a really challenging thing to test, especially for calculus-based physics when it might be some people's first physics class. And the issue you meet with that in the educational world is it's very challenging to make an exam around that because it's so broad. I mean, it's so open. I could ask you a geometry question. I could ask you a calculus question. I could ask you an algebra question, and you won't know which one I'm looking for. But they might give you radically different answers. And so the nice part about actuarial and financial mathematics is that magical triangle is a lot smaller, right? Everything is much more connected and ingrained and makes sense. I don't think our education system does a good job of kind of connecting math together, and I think actuarial does a very good job of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to the discussion at hand, what did you find underrated as an actuary?
If you ask actuaries now, the answer is surprisingly consistent, and it's not something that we talk about, I think, very much as a profession. The number one coolest thing about being an actuary is who you get to work with. Like, having an actuary as a peer is incredible. These are people who are persistent in the face of failure. There's 10 exams. The pass rates are like 50%. Virtually no one gets through it without failure. So you have people that are, very diligent and hardworking and willing to persist, one. Two, they tend to be very intelligent or at least know a lot of stuff because they spend a lot of time educating themselves. And three, they tend to be relatively humble people. The process is humbling, and you realize how intelligent so many of your peers are. So almost never do you walk into an actuarial department and you have someone with a big ego walking through thinking they're hot shit. Like, everyone knows, hey, everyone here is pretty high caliber, and it just creates really nice work environments because you trust your coworkers and their competency. And I think that's just different than a lot of jobs where you take a job and you question, like, who am I going to end up working with? Like, what kind of personality are they going to have? And I think there's a knock that maybe actuaries are kind of boring and they're all alike. And there certainly are a lot of common threads, but the things that are common in most actuaries are really good qualities. And so it's just a really nice place to work, to go to work every day and get to be around those kind of people.
Okay, so on the flip side then, what's overrated about being an actuary?
Interesting question. What's overrated about being an actuary? I would say that the exams bleeding into your 20s can be challenging. In your youth, it's like, everyone's like, man, you make so much money so fast. So, imagine you're making $120,000 by the time you're 25. Then you don't get ages 20 to 25 back, though.
Yeah.
Right? That's a special time. And it's, I think it's a challenging balance that a lot of actuaries struggle with, trying to make sure that they live a life that's fulfilling and interesting and worthwhile in their youth, while also still progressing through these really ridiculously time-demanding exams. So that's probably the most overrated part.
But so has the profession allowed for hybrid or remote work settings?
It's interesting. Right now, there is a 7% unemployment rate in the actuarial field, and there is 1%, there's 7% job vacancy and 1% unemployment. That means there is a negative 6% unemployment rate. And again, we study economics. When the supply of actuaries is too low and the demand is really high, actuaries get to command a lot in terms of salary expectations, what kind of work they want, and companies, because they need actuaries to do their job, they provide a lot of flexibility around how actuaries work and what they want to do.
So do you think that would be a way to get your early to mid 20s back? I mean, because if you think about it, if you can work remotely, you can work anywhere.
Yeah.
And being an actuary, it doesn't really seem like you need to be in the office talking every day. I mean, you can have Zoom meetings and you can do X, Y, and Z. And as long as I think that there's a synchronous schedule, do you think that would be conducive to traveling, or not really?
It's an interesting question. So on the one hand, the exams it's not that the exams don't prepare you to be an actuary, but there's just certain skills you only learn on the job. Products vary really widely. Company, the way they structure products, the process that they go through, the software that they use. And so if you're entering an entry-level actuarial role, there's definitely value and benefit to being in the office. And just think about it as, you're 22, you're leaving college, your social group is gone, or at least a significant part of it is moving or doing something else. There's a big part of your identity that gets wrapped up in where you work and who you work with. And so, being fully remote, I think can provide, I think it depends on who you are and where you get your identity from, like where you get that sense of self. But I have known many actuaries who have worked very flexibly and traveled quite extensively while taking and passing exams. And I think that, when I took exams, I love to study when I travel. If I'm stuck on a 4-hour layover and I study for 4 hours, that's a great 4 hours of studying. No distractions. Just get, I'm sitting poolside somewhere. Like, okay, I can break out the book. I got nothing else to do. It's an hour. Every second I spend studying, I feel kind of good about myself. So there's definitely great ways to identify that work-life balance and capture that in the actuarial field.
Well, you sound like a riot at the pool.
Hey,
everybody else is drinking. 1 second, guys. Let me get my calculator out.
Yeah, I guess I should read, romance novels.
Yeah. Work on your tag. Yeah. I have a question for you. Another one, off topic, unrelated, but slightly related. So I was reading in the news how a lot of firms, not actuary, but finance firms, are moving from Wall Street down to Texas for lower tax reasons and are building offices there. Do you think, right now, the actuarial profession is centered, New York area, Chicago area, and isn't North Carolina, Charlottesville?
Atlanta, yeah.
Yeah. So those are the three big. Do you see it changing from that as other finance companies in Silicon Valley disperse across the nation, or do you think that Wall Street's, can't be moved?
Yeah. So New York is New York. I think that it will always be. It's like London, right? Like, is another city going to take over what London stands for from a global financial perspective? Like, no.
Maybe New York did.
It has, in a sense, because it's in the United States, and I think it's a big global symbol. As populations grow, which Texas is growing very rapidly, it will develop more finance companies. It will attract young talent. That's what it's doing right now. From an insurance perspective, the insurance industry is interesting. It's very slow. It's very hard to disrupt. And there's a couple reasons for that. One of them is it's very to make money running an insurance company is not easy. And it's intentionally so, because the risk of an insurance company going under is, punishing people that are trusting in it.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That's inherently what insurance is, right? Like I'm making a promise. Give me your money. And the only thing I'm giving back to you is a sheet of paper that says, I promise I'll pay you back later if something bad happens. And so the regulations for it are pretty stringent, not just in like, make sure you charge the right amount, but like what contracts are you using? What standards are you going to have to underwrite the people who come in, that you're not, accidentally building an artificial intelligence model that excludes black people, or, when claims come, how do you guarantee and ensure that you're responding to them in a timely manner? And so the compliance is really challenging because governments want to make sure that people get paid from the promises they're made. But on top of that, insurance is one of the only products that when it's sold, no one knows how much money they're going to make. Right? Like if I sell you a TV and I know how much that TV costs, I know sitting there, I count it in my hand. But if I sell you an auto insurance policy or 100 people an auto insurance policy, I'm not going to know for 12 months if I had claims. And then even when I have claims, well, some of them might go to court. I might have judge back. I might not know for 5, 6, 7 years after I sell an insurance policy whether I made money on it. And so it just makes it very hard for new insurance companies to start and to disrupt the existing ones. So I see right now in the market, Texas is one of the biggest growing markets without question. There's a lot of cool things going on there. As people move, as activity happens, insurance is going to be needed and new companies will form locally. But to disrupt the big markets like Chicago and New York, I think would be very difficult.
So we're talking about geographical areas. What about climate change? I mean, you're already seeing Florida and California. I mean, there are people's houses literally sinking into the ocean right now. How is
such
that
a good question?
Yeah, how is that going to disrupt?
Because I think from like a top of mind perspective, this is one of the things that the actuarial profession really cares about. When you look at the generation of people in college right now that are entering the professional world, Gen Z or whatever, Gen AA. What do you call Gen AA?
I think I'm just Gen Z.
Well, not you, but what's the generation after you? Whatever they are.
Yeah. People before 2000, people after 2006.
Yeah.
I don't know what that.
They care. They care about the environment. And insurance companies are kind of seen as these big bad corporations, but there's not an industry that I can think of that like cares as much about climate change and its impact on humanity as insurance does. Because those are the claims, right? Those are the hurricanes that hit. Those are the new tornadoes that are coming. Those things, we model it. We have huge data sets. They produce reports on it every year. Climate change matters to the actuarial profession. The insurance has the best data. Yeah. We have the most comprehensive, best data on the planet around the impact of climate change and how it affects humanity. And we're doing our best to be evangelical about spreading the knowledge and information that's out there and educating the public about what's really going on. So if you care about climate change, being an actuary and working in insurance is a surefire way to get closer and truly understand it.
Yeah, and I think going off that too, why do you think actuarials and insurance companies are seen as the big bad wolf of capitalism?
Why are insurance companies the big bad wolf? I think because one, there is a personal experience that sometimes people have. On one hand, having to pay for it and not need it.
Yeah, it's true.
Right?
That's probably painful.
So many people, especially ones that are required, like you have to buy home insurance. The bank says you have to do this. You have to buy car insurance. And you're like, well, I'm a great driver. They're definitely charging me too much. Why am I throwing away hundreds of dollars a month, for something I'm never going to claim on? Yeah. Right. So people have this tangible experience where it's like, oh, the insurance company's job is to make money on me. And it is. And genuinely, you want them to. You want an insurance company to make money, because the alternative is they lost money and when
you don't get anything,
and then they collapse. Yeah, and that is so much worse. So you want it's really important that insurance companies are pricing things with a margin. Now there are companies like mutual insurance companies that pay that money back. And in fact, one of the big things that's emerging right now is takaful insurance, which is Islamic compliant insurance, where part of the requirement is that you can't make money on the policyholders. So there are insurance products like mutual and companies that have been around for hundreds of years, and new emerging ones that the focus is you will get your money back as a pool of people if the losses are less than we charged you. The other one, I think, just to finish this thought, is one of the things that happens when companies sell insurance and they have worse than expected experiences, they try to figure out ways to minimize claims, right? Because that maximizes profit. And so people probably also sometimes have this experience of trying to file a claim, and there's not, whose fault it is not a moral question. It's a legal question.
Yeah.
And so there are insurance companies that have to go after your grandmother for who made a mistake on the road and hurt someone else, and it's her fault. And an insurance company, someone is required to make sure that the person responsible is the one that's charged for it. Yeah. And so I think that kind of maybe not amorality, but this we have to do what is legally the right thing, even if it doesn't feel good sometimes, can just leave a lot of people with personally bad experiences of interacting with insurance.
So going on that, when I took my intro to actuarial science class, they're talking about, I believe it's no fault clauses that they want to implement, where basically a lawyer can't sue based on fault. And obviously none of the 50 states have adopted this because of lobbying groups from law firms. What do you think about that? That's something I always wondered, but I've never actually talked to an actuary.
No, explain it to me. I'm not super. I did not work on the property casualty, which is the liability side.
Yeah.
Where it's someone else had loss.
Yeah.
Or I caused that loss, right? That's where liability comes in.
Yeah. So I guess from the basic principle of it is that right now with the way the auto insurance is set up, let's say I T-bone you in an accident.
Yeah.
Okay. There's fault on both hands slightly. Let's say you were speeding 10 miles per hour over, and I say, because if you weren't speeding, I wouldn't have hit you. Mm-hmm. We can both lawyer up, and we can both go to court about it, and we can both try to bleed the insurance companies dry off of it. And that is the current system we have. I mean, that is why there are law offices that are huge that are in every commercial telling you to call them if you get in an auto injury.
Yeah.
From what I understand about the no fault is that you would just cut that out, and nobody can claim fault, right? Fault no longer exists, and you get an automatic payout. And from what I've seen, the people that lose the most are the lawyers, right? Because insurance companies now no longer need to pay for your lawyer to lawyer up. And all the money that would have went to the lawyer can now be redistributed back to you basically for the claim, right? Mm-hmm. It's cutting out the middleman, okay?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, as an actual actuary, what do you think about this? How do you factor in who's going to call a lawyer on you? I guess that's probably a harder question for you being in life, but it probably still goes around with doctor misconduct and things like that. How do you factor in who's going to sue somebody?
So let me just take a step back and say this is obviously a challenging topic, and that I am not an expert in it. But there's probably two competing factors here. On one side, imagine there's a T-bone happens and both cars are covered, and the insurance company pays you for your loss based on your coverage, and the other company pays for that person. Well, if one of you really is at fault, then the insurance company, without either of you lawyering up, might still want to go after that other company and say, hey, it was your fault. You should pay for ours too.
Yeah.
Right. So who's responsible for loss is important to insurance companies, regardless of whether a lawyer gets involved. Lawyers are the ones that get it done.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like I, as an actuary, I just call them up, like, hey, buddy, I looked at this report over here and it's definitely your fault. Send us a check. Yeah. Attorneys do that, and there's lots of attorneys that work at insurance companies. I hope that's not surprising to anyone. The litigious nature of lawyers trying to go maximize individual claims, and to me, it's a lot of what you see, I think, is less about fault and more about loss. So, oh, you got in a car accident. What the lawyer really wants is, oh, well, hold on, say these specific things so that your injuries, your loss is really high.
Yeah.
And let's claim that your loss is way higher than what the insurance companies say it is. And so, from that perspective, while the lawyer probably gets a chunk of that claim if it goes through, they're at least trying to protect people's individual, hey, you may have experienced more loss than that insurance company is telling you, because they don't want to. It's not that they don't want to pay out claims. Yeah. Some insurance companies want to play claims and have good policyholders and good relationships, but there is an incentive from a profit, a profit-making incentive that insurance companies want to pay out the least amount possible.
Yeah.
So I don't think that answers your question in terms of my opinion on it, other than it's just a complicated thing. And for me, because I've worked with emerging regulations before, ideas are great. Administration is really hard. So implementing things is often the most difficult part of new ideas like that.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
Interesting question, though.
Yeah, I know. I came across it in class, and I was like, "Wow, this is a very interesting question that I never had answered for me." And what better time than now?
Any more questions on is that all of them?
That's everything I got.
Okay, let's talk about mortgages and buying houses. Okay,
right.
So leading up to this, you'd asked me whether I think someone should buy a house.
Yes, it's 2024. It looks like that interest rates
right now
might be coming down.
Yeah, I don't know what interest rates are going to do. If anyone tells you what they're going to do, they're either lying to you or lying to themselves. No one really knows. That's just the truth. No one knows what the interest rates are going to do. No one knows what the stock market's going to do. New information comes up and it changes everything, and that happens continuously forever. So should you buy a house? I think that's a very individual decision. There's obviously benefits to not buying a house. There are additional liabilities you don't acquire, like, hey, things can break or go wrong that I'm responsible for. But in terms of financially, interest rates are high. Prices have not come down, though we're seeing them start to soften up a little bit. I think that it really just comes down to the longevity of of whether you want to stay there. I would say now is probably not a good time to buy a house if you're thinking of selling in 2 years or moving again in a short period of time. And the reason for that is, let's walk through a couple scenarios.
All right.
Okay. So imagine you buy a house today, and in 2 years, interest rates haven't changed. Inflation is still persistent. Employment stays strong. Fed says, hey, we're not cutting interest rates for 2 consecutive years, which, by the way, for the last 12 to 15 months, every single meeting, they're like, hey, Fed's going to announce a rate cut. Or the Fed's like, yeah, we're going to do a rate cut. And then they're always like, we're going to push it back a little bit. Not yet. That pesky inflation, it stays. We're going to wait a little longer. So just imagine 2 years, and then prices come back down, another 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
So if you go to sell your house, you put 20% down, 10% value, you lost 10%. Plus, you have to pay at least 6% transaction fee usually to sell. So let's look at another scenario where interest rates come down and you want to resell. Well, the nice part about interest rates coming down is that you can refinance. So all of a sudden, it's cheaper for you to own that. And so I guess that could be a good scenario. And then, so that's one of 3. And then the third one is interest rates go up more.
Yeah.
And no one's like, the interest rates won't go up more. They have.
Yeah.
They have. It hasn't happened for a long time, so we have a bit of recency bias here. But in the face of persistent inflation, and by the way, if we're talking about what inflation could do in the future, there's a lot of reasons to think inflation is not going to go down, right? Government spending continues to be high. The job market continues to be strong. Basically, every indicator for why inflation happens continues to signal that it could continue to persist, in which case interest rates can go up more. which would further depress housing value. And then your mortgage is all of a sudden really valuable and you don't want to give that up. So you feel locked down.
Yeah.
So if you look just at those three scenarios, right, you're really making a bet that only one of those is going to be good for you. Now, if you're willing to hold it for a while and you're thinking like, this is where I want to live and I'm going to stay there, then you can weather what happens in the market because your interest rate is locked and your payments are locked. And so in an uncertain market like this, don't buy unless you're planning on holding for a while.
Yeah.
And back to your point, if you're graduating college, what an incredible time we live in terms of work flexibility and opportunity. Why not try to enjoy that time and live with as little encumbrance as possible?
Yeah, that makes sense. But going off that too, I have a question. So my rent last year was like $3,600 for the house. I had a 6-person house, 6 dudes in it. I could see
$3,600 a month
for 6 guys.
For 6 guys, okay.
Yes, where we live. I could see through the floor. I mean, it was certainly anything but a beautiful house.
I am astounded to hear that college housing is not very nicely maintained.
So if you run the math, if I do 3,600 times 360, let's say they have a 30-year mortgage. Just off the top of my head, that's more than $1 million house. Okay.
Taxes and insurance.
Taxes and insurance are included. They're not included in that 3,600. But like
I was gonna say because third to 30 to 40% of your payments are probably going to be mortgage and insurance, or are going to be insurance and taxes.
So how much is it?
30 to 40%.
Okay,
Milwaukee.
so that makes sense. That was something I always wondered. I'm like, there's no way. I'm not living in $1 million house right now.
But if you're living in a house that's bringing in $3,600 a month, I mean, it's probably worth over $500,000.
Yeah. Well, but you get the bias of being next to a campus, so
you're also less than a mile from the lakefront.
That's true. But I could live in South Milwaukee and I get a house for $100K less than a mile from the lakefront. It'd probably be a pretty similar house.
Where in the south side of Milwaukee are you finding $100,000 houses?
The city of South Milwaukee.
Oh, by the airport.
Yeah, south of the airport.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a very reasonable price neighborhood.
Yeah, that's probably where I think I'll move.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, it's cheap. You're right next to the lake. Milwaukee seems to be on the up.
It does.
Why not?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So what's your question?
My question? Well, you can answer it. My question was, how can somebody charge $3,600 a month?
Oh, yeah.
And I guess if 30 to 40% of it is going towards insurance, which it probably will, because I'm assuming insuring 6 19-year-old guys isn't going to be cheap.
Yes.
And so that answered my question pretty well.
And you live in a city, and the county and that counties in big cities tend to have higher tax rates as well.
Yeah. But so that was my question going there.
Yeah.
When do you think somebody should buy a house? Like, what's the age? Or do you think there is no age you should just? I mean,
I don't know. I think it's much more lifestyle than it is finance. Fortunately, the United States federal government cares greatly about your ability to buy a house. Genuinely, we live in a country unlike any other country that just cares so deeply about your ability to buy a house. Let's just talk about 30-year fixed rate interest mortgage. That doesn't exist in any other country.
Really?
No, that is only the United States. And the only reason it exists is because the federal government makes sure there's a liquid secondary market for it. Because they want you to be protected in home ownership. The second thing is there's a lot of grants that you can get for first-time home buyers. The FHA offers 0% down loans. There's PMI, personal mortgage insurance, that you can buy without an FHA and put 0% down. Your payments will be higher, but again, it's a no capital cost ability to purchase a house.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of tools and instruments. I think the biggest challenge right now is simply that interest rates are high and prices have not come down. Since the spike we saw post COVID. So how lucky are we? When you should buy a house, I think is personal for you. So I bought a house when I was going to get married, and we had two incomes, and we weren't planning on leaving either company that we were working for. And, it was well within our budget to be able to afford it. So, I wait till you're 35, do it. If I know actuaries that get married their junior year in college and buy a house and, are pregnant within 2 years of graduating. Like that's a totally reasonable. And then I know people like my brother who is over 30 years old and rents an apartment across the street from Wrigley Field and goes to a third of the games and lives what he considers the greatest life ever. And he could never live like that if he wanted to buy a house. So I think it's whatever your lifestyle demands.
Your brother, though, does live a very interesting and probably enjoyable life.
He does. And home ownership has nothing to do with it.
No, home ownership has absolutely nothing to do with it. And a home ownership can never have anything to do with it.
That's right.
Because it goes against the nature of his life.
Yes, that's right. So, yeah, I can't give you advice. But one of the great things, I want to go back to how lucky we are to live in the United States. Like, we have this permanent interest rate hedge. Right? Like if you buy a house today and you're willing to hold, it can only be good for you. Right?
Yeah.
So two things that can happen. The value of your house can go down. That's true. Mm-hmm. But we learned this in FM, right? Mortgage is a stream of cash flows. And what happens to a stream of cash flows when the interest rate goes up?
The prices go down.
Yeah. Well, it's a negative, it's a liability. So your liability goes down.
Yeah.
Right. So when interest rates go up, your mortgage is now worth more because you're paying less than everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay. But your interest rate doesn't go up.
Yeah.
But now what happens when the opposite? When interest rates go down, you can refinance your mortgage.
And now I can get it for
and then you get it for you can get it for a lower rate.
That's a US only thing? Is refinancing a US only thing?
You can refinance in other countries, but most countries have penalties. You pay the difference in market value. Right? So the bank's not going to get effed. Because again, it has a lot to do with liquid secondary markets. Right? So when I worked in the investments department, we had to model all of the prepayments that would happen on the mortgages on our balance sheet, the collateralized mortgages, commercial mortgages. It's a big pool of them. And we know that if interest rates go down, the percentage of them that gets paid off is going to go up.
Yeah.
So it's a risk that we take on the invest, but we pass that risk from us, the individuals, and we pass it to the investors. And investors deal with that risk. They get paid for it, with higher rates, but we can pass that risk off.
Yeah. And so I have a question that relates to insurance. Coming back to the greatness of the U.S. The U.S. is the only place of developed nations without nationwide healthcare for all, right? They're not tax-based healthcare. Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing?
In my personal opinion, I think it's a bad thing that we don't. The premise that a family can go bankrupt because their child gets cancer is absurd to me.
Yeah, that's fair. That is very true.
That's just it. And the other thing I think about is it seems anti-capitalistic in a sense, in that because of the cost of healthcare right now, it almost makes it financially prohibitive for someone to go out and do something entrepreneurial.
Yeah, because you lose that.
Yeah, you lose this protection that you're granted from a corporate environment.
Yeah, you're pretty much, to start your own business, you're pretty much required to be either married or to just have an obscene level of capital that you can pay out of pocket and shell it.
Yeah, so it's a complicated topic, and we do a lot of advancements and things, and we support a global innovative market of new products and prescriptions because you can capitalize a lot of it in the United States. So I get that there are some good things about having a private healthcare system where people can make a lot of money by developing new solutions. Like GLP-1s are a great example, and that the people who designed them and made them make a lot of money, and it's expensive. Yeah. I was an advisor at an angel investment firm. I saw lots of companies develop products that never made it through trials. Spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to develop products that they thought would solve a problem and they couldn't get it through human trials, or they got it all the way to human trials and they didn't get the result that they wanted. So there's a lot of capital that needs to be recovered from all of the products that don't work. So, people don't like, you make all these profit margins on the products that do, but that's because lots and lots of products don't, and lots of the capital goes in there. And I know, I'm not saying that, the profit margins are being reinvested in R&D rather than paying back investors. I understand that argument. It's like I said, it's a complicated
topic.
issue. Yeah. But in my personal opinion, I think a single payer system would bring down costs, would encourage a more entrepreneurial world, and would deliver more equitable outcomes for individuals.
So do you see, as the wealth gap between Americans gets bigger, do you think we'll see more people enter the entrepreneurial world to try to make money, or do you think we'll see the opposite? Does that make sense? So as capital spreads each way, right, do you think that some people will see it as a way out? Because in a way it is, if you have a successful...
So you're saying, like, right now we're seeing the difference in average wealth from like a median wealth perspective to like the top 1% is growing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as that continues to grow...
So as you continue to separate, do you think that the lower end will take higher risks to try to escape the lower end, to try to make it to this upper echelon by starting businesses and taking risk? Or do you think the opposite, that it will almost just become like an oligarchy of, my dad's a trillionaire or my parents are trillionaires, so obviously I'm going to start a business, and then it's just a vicious cycle?
Great question. Complicated answer.
Another complicated one.
Yeah, I mean, these are complicated topics. And again, this is just my opinion. One, what it takes, like the thing, the entrepreneurial thing, I think just a certain percentage of populations have it. And I don't think that changes all that much. You can be born into wealth and not have the entrepreneurial, itch.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, but we live in a country that is designed to enable people to do it. I mean, you or I can go file an LLC, build a product. I mean, if we can build a product that, financing and things, but we can just start up a business idea and go try to make money on it. And there's essentially, you can just go do it. There's no restriction on it. And I think people, regardless of where they come from, will pursue those routes. Having networks and wealth increases success rates. One of the things that we also do well in the United States is that we have strong localized venture capital worlds. So you can come, if you can get a train ticket to Silicon Valley, you will meet startup companies, you can go work for them. The access to education is really good. Like if you come from a poor family, you can get free education, learn a skill like technology and coding, get a job at a startup company and go work in that world and get access to it. So I think even though the wealth gap continues to grow, the small percentage of people who want that, who are willing to take those risks, will continue to do so. And because, again, we live in a society that endorses and supports capitalism, there will be investors that will give money to someone who has no money
and
if they think they have a great business idea. Now, so with that being said, I don't think that the growing wealth gap will limit anything like that. But there are certainly hard truths about being in poverty or being able to get by that make the pursuit of even the things that are granted for free challenging.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are people, that live in areas where the tax system's not good, the education system is not good as a result of that as well, and thus they don't have the same quality education, and it makes it really challenging to get through, a collegiate degree. So there are systemic issues that will continue to be challenging as that wealth gap increases, but I don't think it will reduce the number of people who aspire. And also just realize that a lot of the people who aspire in the United States don't come from the United States. I mean, we are a magnet for the global population that have that itch.
Yeah.
right? Like if you're born in India or China, they have great developed markets, but you know that the place you can make the most money is the United States. Yeah. Everyone born in another country, not everyone, but they know this is. I mean, Elon Musk could have gone anywhere when he came from South Africa. You know, he got a degree in Canada because they have a great education system, and then he went to San Francisco, right? If you want that, everyone knows that's where to go.
Yeah, that's a good point. And what would you describe as that itch? What feeds it? What makes you want? I mean, I was reading a report, okay, and it was talking about how the wealthiest 1% are actually dumber than the wealthiest, than the 98th percentile, which makes sense, right? Because if I'm an actuary and I'm making, let's say $250,000 a year, I probably will feel comfortable at that salary range and not feel the need to go and start my own business. What
risk tolerance?
Risk tolerance?
That's the difference. People who love skydiving are more likely to build successful businesses than people who have never had a traffic infraction, right? It's the people who are willing to invest in high risk assets that I might lose all my money on this, but I'm okay with that. All right, risk tolerance. How comfortable am I taking really big risks with uncertain outcomes? Because that's what being entrepreneurial is about. Most businesses fail. It's just a fact. And a lot of success has nothing to do with you. Yeah. It's about the market, it's about the demand, and not only that, but there's just a lot of skills that need to be developed that it's just hard to be taught, or hard to be taught in a concise, short manner. It's funny, I talked to one of the entrepreneur professors at the university, and he said, I teach this class for entrepreneurs, but most of the kids who register for it aren't going to be the people that start companies. The people that start companies are out there drinking at the bar right now. They're willing to take risks, have fun, do stuff that's not traditional. Another big factor is being comfortable violating social norms.
Like what norms? I mean,
just period. Like most great ideas that end up being successful are not well received by the average person, right? Like otherwise, lots of people would pursue
it. Yeah.
So you have to really be comfortable. Like I'm doing this thing that most of the people around me don't think is a good idea, or think that I'm not going to be successful doing it. And you have to be comfortable going against that social expectation of your peers. Like, oh, I'm going to do it anyway, right? So having
that leadership, right?
Well, you can be a great leader and comply with social norms. In fact,
most leaders do.
Yeah, when you go to the corporate world, that's exactly who you put into management, right? Because you want people that rally around them, that like them, that are comfortable.
Will stay there.
Yeah, that I feel comfortable with you, that you do the things that I like, that you listen to what I say, that if I push that you'll, not that you do whatever I want, but that, middle management is a lot of that balance of like, okay, the top's telling what I need, but I also need to make sure that I serve my people and that they're happy and that they stay and they're productive. To be an entrepreneur is like, I'm going to do this even if everyone tells me it's stupid. like legitimately. And they've done this. They've measured, personality characteristics of successful entrepreneurs, and disagreeableness is the highest correlated trait. You need to be comfortable disagreeing with everyone else.
The ability to say no.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to do that. No, I don't want to do that. This is the thing that I'm going to focus on. No, I'm not going to take a job. It's challenging, but that's one of the. And again, I don't think it's much learned as it is just a characteristic that you're kind of born with.
And I think too, with going back to actuary, I think that's another reason why you see, because it goes in hand with the exams, right? Very few students have what it takes to, when everybody else is out drinking or enjoying their summer, to sit there and study for an exam that you probably will fail, and you'll have to pay $400 out of pocket to. I mean, you're statistically likely to fail, and you're guaranteed to lose money on it at first. I mean, the cost is present. Yes. The option of getting a job is not.
Yes.
Especially for the early level exams.
Yes.
So do you think degrees like actuarial kind of feed that and is like a higher market for that? Or do you think it's just a complete luck of the draw? I mean, because also at the same time, you could flip the coin, right? I could flip the coin and say, well, these people probably are less likely to, because they're going an actuarial job. It's a stable, risk-free way to make a decent amount of money.
Yeah, I think risk tolerance is a big filter there. One of the reasons people pursue the actuarial field is that there's so little risk in the profession, right? Like you asked me, like underrated, just job stability. Like it's not incredibly rare. You'll meet people who have been fired because of job cuts. But that's not common, and they find new jobs really fast. So job stability is just like incredibly good in this field, and I think that's a big draw for the people who come in, is that they're like, I am basically guaranteed high income for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I went.
Yeah,
that's why I'm here.
But yeah, there's definitely entrepreneurs amongst actuaries that are willing to, I'm not going to do what everyone else wants me to do right now because I'm investing in something that I think is valuable. And so, I think maybe culturally now, the actuaries that are coming through the system may have more of the entrepreneurial, the disagreeableness that's required to do entrepreneurial things.
Yeah. And I think, too, this is probably based in no science at all. But I think, too, that going back to the generational thing, I think it goes down to like hunger. And it would be stupid for me to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think my generation is like a hungry generation, right? I think we want it, and I don't know if I can say that about the generation directly above us. I think you could say that too about the boomer generation. I think they wanted it. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That was just a weird thing that I thought of, like looking at the classmate around me, and I have a decent sized family, and my extended family too is just a range of ages, and especially looking at the older members of my family, there's just no hunger. And I think as I've grown up, and this is definitely involves bias because it's who I hang out with, and I tend to consider myself a pretty hungry person that way, that I'm going to hang out with those people, but just across the board. I don't know. It's just something interesting.
Yeah, I don't have data or experience. Genuinely,
there's probably no data. There's probably no data.
I'm sure there's lots of data about it. New company founder age. There's probably a variety of things. There's also a big technology and cultural shift right now. I forget the date they all pick, but when Instagram was founded. It's like 2008 or something. Right?
Yeah.
It's like not even 20 years old. And that's going to have a really profound effect on people's behaviors and opinions and
the effects of social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the hunger that you see might be like the want for recognition.
That's probably a better way to put it.
Yeah. But do they have the work ethic and focus?
Yeah, and that's a good thing too. And I think
they're trained on short dopamine cycles.
Yeah.
Is that the right mental training to be willing to sacrifice your weekends to study exams, or to give up all of to disagree with everyone else and not get the likes and support and still persist with an idea?
But I think you can take it the other way too and look at it like my generation compared to yours or the generation above you.
Yeah.
We have, if I want to go out today and make a YouTube channel, or I can do it, and I can get returns quickly. I can't go down, maybe if I'm good at it. Let's say hypothetically I'm good at it.
Yeah.
I could get returns quickly. No other. You could be a 5-year-old and making money. So I think that might be another flaw in my logic.
Well, so one, there's a lot of low barrier opportunity right now.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that have historically you need capital, expertise, resources that you have access to now that you didn't before. But again, economics, right? If it's low barrier and everyone can do it, everyone will, and it will make it hard to be successful doing that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think you have a lot of people have nothing but confirmation bias on social media success.
Yeah, it's true.
You don't see the people who suck.
Fail, yeah.
That's the whole point of social media algorithms, is you don't see the stuff out there that sucks. So we've gone over a wide range of stuff. I just want to wrap it up here. Thank you, Noah, for coming and talking to me. This is a great conversation.
I had a great time. Yeah.
We covered a lot of good stuff. Good luck with your exam and recruitment season this fall.
Thank you. Best of luck with ADI and how things are going over there.
I appreciate that. Have a good one, man.
Yeah.